There are a number of newly elected MPs that have been given roles in Prime Minister Mark Carney's new ministry. These new MPs come from different backgrounds, from former mayors to a Bay Street businessman to a former chief of staff. Now, they'll help the Prime Minister fulfill his ambitious agenda and deliver change to Canadians. And while most of these new faces have been given cabinet minister positions, these 4 MPs have been given Secretary of State roles. Now, my next guest is one of those newly elected cabinet ministers. Gregor Robertson is the new Minister of Housing and Infrastructure and former Mayor of Vancouver. Minister Robertson, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming in today, sir.
Great to be with you.
One of the new faces in a cabinet that the Prime Minister says is all about change. You've been handed housing. If there is a sector that needs real change, it is housing. How do you plan to tackle this?
Well, certainly building off the more recent success in the last few years with Housing Accelerator Fund and the partnerships between the federal government and cities, which is what I know from working in Vancouver. Those partnerships are critical. Obviously, the funding is really critical to come from the federal level, and I think the Prime Minister's commitment around doubling our construction, basically getting the supply up into the bracket where we can build faster, greener, we can build more affordably, and make sure that we're filling in the supply that has been frankly lacking across Canada for decades now. We've lost a generation here, going back many governments, and I think the pace is quickened, but we've got to double down and go to the next level. How
do you credibly and quickly do that when things like zoning are still under provincial control? You know, development fees are still under, municipal control, not provincial control. Right. You're putting a cap on immigration. There is still labor shortages in construction and in home building. I know the shift to modular, but that's going to take time to tool up and to build those supply lines. So how quickly do you deliver real growth in supply here? Yeah,
well, I think you pointed it out right off the top there, was around working with municipalities. You got to have cities, communities at the table. You got to have provinces have a lot of the levers involved too. And this is where I think this rare opportunity where Team Canada and the really critical steps that we got to take as a country to reboot our economy in light of the attacks and the tariffs from the States. Housing, building and construction, biggest industry in the world if you set aside the financial industry, but this is the biggest industry across Canada that we can really mobilize. We need to have all levels of government at the table, really removing, as we're talking about interprovincial barriers, removing the barriers to building faster and more affordably. And so that's partnership that has to be kind of restarted. I think the Prime Minister has put that as a key priority for him in that Team Canada context. We've got to get that to the ground level and making sure we're delivering the incentives, the partnerships, we're making sure that we're giving and driving the pace with local governments and obviously the provinces. We all got to be at the table and using all the tools that we have available. And that's, I know the tools from a city side, and we had real challenges in Vancouver. For many years that I was mayor, the Conservative federal government was not putting those tools on the table, was not investing in cities, particularly in Vancouver. Toronto was the second city to really be hit by affordability challenges. We need all the levels of government focused on this, working together and working with the private sector to build. The private sector can build. The nonprofit sector is proving they can deliver on more affordable and co-op housing. We got to have all of those pistons firing right now to deliver.
Right. Well, you mentioned Vancouver when you were mayor. That's really where the really kind of ground zero for the Canadian housing crisis in a lot of ways. That's where it began. And I know it's day one as Minister of Housing, but your record was under attack during the campaign. People point to the fact that development fees increased by 141%. For a single-family home when you were mayor, and the price of housing in East and West Vancouver basically doubled in round numbers. So how do you defend the appointment with that record to your critics?
Well, it's ridiculous to put that on the people of Vancouver or me as the mayor. This has happened across the country. This has happened around the world. If you look at cities around the world, this housing crisis, the shortage of housing, and the increase in prices, the increase in cost to build is impacting everyone everywhere. So across Canada, we need to tackle this. Vancouver was the first hit, and that's where I say the challenges that we had with the Conservative federal government and the government in BC, who were both not frankly interested in investing in dealing with an affordable housing crunch as it was hitting. 2008, we had a global economic recession related to housing, obviously. That didn't help either. So we've had multiple challenges, and I think that what's different now is that we've got a prime minister and a new government here in Ottawa who are saying we need to double the rate of construction, we need to work across all levels of government, we need to engage the private sector to do this. We didn't have any of that going back to 2008. We had, we did everything we could do as a city. In my 10 years as mayor, we were the first to have an empty homes tax. That's created thousands of units of housing,
right.
Hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue for the city. We were the first to have rental-only zoning to protect some of the neighborhoods from condo development that was jacking up the real estate prices. We pulled everything we could together as a city government, but we didn't have enough support, frankly, from the federal and provincial government.
I mean, the national government got out of building affordable homes long before Stephen Harper was concerned.
Exactly.
It was the Liberal government that did it,
Yep.
right? I remember being in university, and my tuition would go up from September to January because of cuts to the provinces. So I get why supply was challenged there. How do you explain the increase in the development fees when you were there? Because I used to cover city council in St. John's, and they didn't want to raise the property tax because of people with fixed incomes. They didn't want them forced out of their homes. So they shifted it all to development charges as a way of just driving up the price for new home buyers because they weren't already voters and different things. Is that what happened in Vancouver? How do you explain that?
I wouldn't. It's not really what happened in Vancouver. I mean, the challenges with the city are, it's really cost recovery around the charges that the city levies, whether it's for business and development. With development cost charges in Vancouver, there's a cost recovery aspect that to invest in the infrastructure you need. The city has to make lots of improvements, all the costs related to new housing that have to go into place. The other piece of the puzzle there is, though, keeping taxes low is one thing. The housing market is driven by what people will pay for housing. So, when the development community is reaping large profits and the city is struggling to make the bottom line work, that there was some rebalancing there. We had community amenity charges as well in Vancouver, basically that were put in place before my time so that the public would benefit from the development.
Right.
When market housing is selling at those rates, we may as well take some of that back into the public purse, and the developers are making money. They made their profits, healthy profits for many years. Just got to make sure that the public sector, that our governments aren't giving everything away when the price is escalating because of what people will pay for that housing. So, and this is where the critical role of the federal government to make sure we're getting affordable housing built,
right.
Supportive housing, co-op housing. We've got to make sure below market housing is being driven by the federal government, supported by local and provincial governments as well. Well,
this is the challenge, I guess, as a final point, is that cycle of development fees and different things. This is what has sort of led to the higher baseline price and the entry point of getting into the market. You want to increase the supply, but people have so much of their savings and their retirement. The home is their biggest asset, and that's what they're relying on. So how do you increase supply and make housing more affordable without ruining the retirement plans of people who have homes that they want to eventually cash out on? How do you thread that needle as minister? Yeah,
it's that is a challenging piece there, and that's where we're looking at several different aspects of the housing market. Market housing obviously is driven by market prices, and people that own housing or own buildings, they're riding on that market price. We have to make sure that we are building below market housing at a scale that makes sure we don't have people sleeping in the streets, that our young people can access the housing market. We've got new tools coming in terms of first-time home buyers not paying up to $1 million, getting $50,000 off. And that amount, if you're going up to $1.5 million in the more expensive markets. So we've got to create some incentives and opportunities for people to get into the market. We got to make sure that people's assets are obviously protected, and that's the market housing. But a big focus now on affordable housing and making sure there's entries into that, and the supply is keeping up with the demand.
Okay, and how quickly do you think Canadians will actually see change? Because this is the thing, we've been talking about housing for years now. The housing accelerator deals that Sean Fraser did, and your predecessors in this, it's just getting into the system, and maybe even not in some cases. So how quickly do you actually anticipate change happening?
Yeah, well, I think there is momentum now with the housing auxiliary funding, and those partnerships with local governments and the investment in housing infrastructure and the water and the utilities, the cost of that, helping the local governments with that. It's going to take years. I mean, this is decades of building up a problem, so it's not going to be fixed overnight. Certainly, in
the promise is to double home construction, though, right? By when? It's 2025. When do we double the pace of home construction?
That's our test. I think that's we've set a really high bar here to shoot for. We're counting on innovation and Canadian building technologies rising to this challenge, so we can build modular, we can build off-site manufacturing, we can use Canadian materials and accelerate. Build faster than our labor force right now is growing. So that's a tension as well, but we've got to make sure we're funding those Canadian companies, entrepreneurs, to get their technologies scaled up to market. That'll help us drive the pace as well. But it's a big challenge.
It's years away, we're talking.
We're years away,
years.
And we've got to put our shoulders to the wheel collectively.
Well, Gregor Robertson, thanks for coming in. Congratulations, new Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. No pressure, but I think every Canadian under 40 is counting on you. Good luck. Thank you, sir.
Including my kids.
All right, thank you, sir. It's Gregor Robertson, the new Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to bring in the panel on this. Michelle Cadario, James Moore, Françoise Boivin, and Emily Nicola. Michelle, you have some experience with British Columbia and the Lower Mainland and housing prices there. I mean, the big challenges here for the former Mayor of Vancouver, now the new Housing Minister.
Yeah, there absolutely are. And while I might bristle at part of that narrative, I think that the reality is there is a role that all three levels of government have to step up and step into. And it does mean actually, not being defensive and actually trying to find solutions. And everybody's probably got to give a little bit. Certainly, the Prime Minister has identified development costs as one of those things that he wants to tackle. He's also talked about leveraging private sector dollars in terms of the housing supply, and he seems to have like a very revolutionary kind of idea about how we might tackle this problem. But from my point of view, I just think that it is not the fault of any one person or any one mayor. That is for sure. The minister was correct. It is happening all around the world. But that means that we have to that doesn't mean that we don't have to find a solution, or at least try and appease the problem a bit. And it will really mean that everybody's kind of put a little water in their wine and kind of move forward and try and figure out a way through this.
Yes, look, he was the mayor of Vancouver when a lot of this happened, but we have a weak mayor system in Canada, right? Councils make the decisions. It's not an executive function like in the United States. No, I know that. I'm just saying, like, there is. I'll come back to you, James, I promise. But there are collective responsibilities at different things. But Emily, just as a much younger person who wants to buy a home, I believe, as we've discussed before, what do you make of this focus and what is being put in the window by the Carney government on this on day one of this shuffle?
I think one of the issues, there's many issues with the housing market that have been discussed a lot already, but one of them is the issue of municipalities themselves and their own responsibilities and how they need to fix their regulations in some ways. And this is something that's been said before in terms of allowing more or prioritizing more off-market housing, more social housing. There's a lot of tools that still can be used by municipalities. The thing that I think to me is a good news by appointing a former big city mayor is that he does have the pre-existing relationship with a lot of the people who are already mayoral leadership around the country. And a lot of that is actually about building relationships so that the file goes well, because it's such a multi-layered, multi-government file. And so if you already are in good terms and speaking relationship with a lot of the other big city mayors around the country, I think it will speed up the ways in which he can settle in this, set in his new position and actually start building. Because it's, I love that Mélanie Joly was speaking to shifting her role as a foreign minister with diplomacy there to a different kind of diplomacy. I think that's a good analogy in the sense that this is, if you're trying to fix housing in this country, it is also a diplomatic role. And if you have pre-existing relationship, that's really going to help.
Francois, your thoughts, and I got to get to James because he made that noise, and I need to know what's coming after it.
I'm still digesting that you think that we're old because
Thank you.
Emily is the young one.
Oh,
but
no,
that's
no,
okay.
I was comparing her to me. She's much younger than me. I would never drag your ages into this.
I'm just kidding.
I'm the millennial renter here, so
Yeah,
I think that's the commentary.
I enjoyed the interview with Minister Robertson. I think he wants to do a lot of things, but welcome to federal politics. It will not be easy. The amount of municipalities that he will have to deal with, provinces, we keep forgetting that they have the jurisdiction in housing, how these people are all going to work together. Maybe the emergency that is in the sector will help. We should not forget also the part of infrastructure in his title, because I know in my province, the problem on infrastructure is absolutely horrific. And everybody's going to come and knock on his door for money. But I think we're past the point where just money will solve everything. So I salute his goodwill. I think he's going to be very tired by the end of the year. And it's not an easy solution because, like you said, there's the aspect of having more on the market, but at the same time, not devaluate what some people have worked so hard for decades to build up and have a better value for their house. So all these things have to be together. There's municipalities who are working towards more environmental construction that will collide with a speedy construction. Nobody's talking about the problem in manpower. Do we suddenly have all these specialty in construction available to us? At the same time, we want to reduce immigration. I mean, so many things comes through my mind. That's why I say good luck, Minister Robertson. You will have fun.
Yeah, I was exhausted at the end of the fiscal year. I don't know what it's going to be like at the end of the calendar year. Okay, James, your thoughts as someone who lives in the Vancouver area.
Yeah, look, personally, I like Gregor Robertson a lot. I had the privilege of being the minister for the 2010 Olympics when he was the mayor of Vancouver during the 2010 Olympics. And we got to sit side by each and celebrate our athletes through that. So on a personal level, I like Gregor Robertson a lot, and I do wish him well. I was a little bit cringing at your interview because, he was mayor of Vancouver for 10 years, and we don't have a weak mayor system, certainly in Vancouver, where when he was mayor, he had an absolute majority on city council of his political party, and he could do anything that he wanted. Right. And I can promise you there is no city in this country that is saying, let's take the Vancouver model that was established by Gregor Robertson and bring it here. Nobody is saying that. And in fact, in Vancouver, the people who actually build homes in Vancouver and in British Columbia and who did so from 2008 to 2018, none of them are saying this was a great model and a great experience within the city of Vancouver and the things that Gregor Robertson controlled. Now, past is past. Moving forward, I certainly wish him well. He's a good man and he's hardworking, and I hope he has success. But a lot of those speeches and a lot of things that he said, I think as Michelle was saying, is just factually not true. Blaming other levels of government is not true. And he's got a lot in front of him, and he's got a big mandate. But look, just RBC Economics just put out a report yesterday that showed that in British Columbia, the economic growth went from 2.4% in 23 to 1.2% last year, anemic growth. And the number one reason why our growth was down is that in spite of rising demand for housing and a lowering of interest rates, residential construction decreased in British Columbia by 8.8%, in part because of the legacy of public policy that we've seen from the federal government over the past decade. And some of the stuff that is still a legacy from Gregor Robertson as mayor that has not been rolled back in the time since he left. So he has a lot to do, and frankly, including being honest about, he would do better off, frankly, in your interview. And I think you pushed him reasonably hard of saying, look, when I was mayor, I dealt in a certain circumstance, and we had our successes and we had our failures. From the failures, I learned more than my successes, and here's how I think we can modernize that for 2025 going forward. If he has that approach, I think he will do much, much better than sort of strident optimism that I think will get you into a brick wall.
Right, and James, and I appreciate that context of like growing up on the other side of the country, right? Like the nuances of Vancouver municipal politics 17 years ago when I was covering provincial politics in Newfoundland. I do appreciate that, and you know, he just got assigned and he just came in, and we just did that without tremendous amount of prep. But that is important to know for future interviews. So Michelle, you know, I think you might have been in the provincial government when that was going on, right? And James is in the federal government. So this is both of your fault is basically what I took away. I'm just kidding. But so.
More Michelle's than ours.
Exactly. There you go. So how do you learn from that experience though, and then apply it to the problem now, right? Because you know, I don't know every input into the decision process that he would have made as mayor of Vancouver with the political party system that exists there and doesn't really exist in a lot of other municipal areas. I mean, what are the kind of the things he can bring from being mayor of Vancouver to kind of cut through, I guess, some of the bureaucratic challenges that exist in municipalities across the rest of Canada?
Well, I think fundamentally he understands the process of how things are getting built in this country or how they're not, right? He knows some of the barriers, he knows some of the, you know, the infrastructure and where it can kind of become a real hindrance and where it can become an opportunity. And, you know, he's got a really, you know, he was mayor for a very long time. And, you know, the Lower Mainland in Vancouver is like 13 municipalities, and the development charges are different in all 13. And so there's a whole bunch of other issues on top of that add to housing prices as well. And, you know, be honest, provincial governments and federal governments, we all have kind of played our role in not necessarily being as focused on the issue as we need to. And it has, you know, it has become even greater of an issue, not just in the big cities across Canada, but in smaller towns and cities as well. And so I think that it's got to, you know, you've got to sit there and be able to learn from your past mistakes and also kind of try and replicate in different areas what might have worked well. He has good relationships with past mayors and that maybe he can draw upon. You know, and I think that he's a smart man. You know, he's got a big job, and I think that he knows that the Prime Minister has big expectations, and it's a load of confidence in terms of appointing him to this position. And so he's, I suspect, going to really roll up his sleeves and do everything he can to succeed.